On May 29, 1453, a city that stood for over 1,000 years, the very heart of an empire, finally fell. Now, this wasn't just a city being conquered. This was the end of an entire era, a single event that sent shockwaves across the globe and literally redrew the map of the world. So how did it happen? How did the city they called unconquerable finally meet its end? Let's dive in.
You've got to understand, for centuries, this prophecy, which is attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, was way more than just words. It was this powerful, driving dream in the Islamic world. It meant that conquering the city wasn't just a military goal, it was a divine promise. So many had tried, and every single one of them had failed. But this prophecy, it fueled an ambition that simmered for generations before one man decided he would be the one to finally make it happen.
By 1453, the Byzantine Empire was really just a shadow of its former self. It was basically just the city of Constantinople and a little bit of land around it. But oh, what a city it was. This was the last piece of the 1,500-year-old Roman Empire, and it was protected by the legendary Theodosian walls. We're talking a triple-layered fortress that had turned back more than a dozen major sieges. It had this reputation for being absolutely, utterly unconquerable.
And when you look at the two leaders, the contrast couldn't be more dramatic. On one side, you've got Sultan Mehmed II. He's just 21 years old, brilliant, and completely obsessed with taking this city. And he's got a massive modern army of around 80,000 soldiers. Then, on the other side, you have Emperor Constantine XI, a veteran leader fighting to defend a 1,000-year legacy with a tiny force of just 7,000 men. The odds were just impossibly stacked against him.
So why was Mehmed so fixated on this one city? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm of reasons. First, of course, was the incredible glory of fulfilling that ancient prophecy. But strategically, Constantinople was sitting right smack in the middle of his empire, splitting it in two. And on top of that, the city was just a constant thorn in the Ottoman side, a base for potential crusades, a safe harbor for his rivals. For Mehmed, taking it wasn't just an option, it was an absolute necessity.
And Mehmed's preparations were incredibly methodical. He did not just rush in. First, he used diplomacy to isolate the city, making sure its allies couldn't interfere. Then he built this incredible fortress, the Rumeli Hasari, in just 3 months, giving him total control of the Bosphorus Strait. But his real trump card was technology. He hired a Hungarian engineer named Orban to build a supercannon, a monster of a weapon over 27 feet long that could hurl 600-pound cannonballs for over a mile. This thing wasn't just a big gun, it was a complete game-changer for siege warfare.
And so, on April 6, 1453, the siege began. For 55 brutal, grueling days, the greatest defenses of the ancient world went head-to-head with the brand-new superweapon of the modern one. It was an incredible contest of endurance, faith, and sheer military ingenuity.
The first few weeks were actually a real struggle for the Ottomans. The giant cannon would pound the walls all day, but at night, the defenders would tirelessly repair the damage. A huge infantry assault on April 18th, beaten back. And then, on April 20th, in this absolutely stunning moment, 4 Christian ships managed to fight their way through the entire Ottoman navy to bring supplies to the city. For the young sultan, it was a massive public humiliation, and it really tested his resolve.
Meanwhile, inside the city, things weren't much better. Deep religious divisions were poisoning the defense. The emperor had begged Catholic Europe for help, and he'd even agreed to unite the Orthodox and Catholic churches to get it. But for a lot of his own people, this felt like a total betrayal. The Grand Duke Lucas Notaras famously said these words, which just goes to show you that many of the Byzantines actually hated their fellow Christians in the West more than the Ottomans, who were literally at their gates.
So here's the critical problem for Mehmed. Constantinople's weakest walls were along the sea inlet, an area called the Golden Horn, but its entrance was blocked by this massive, unbreakable iron chain. His navy couldn't get in. His cannons couldn't reach those vulnerable walls. He was completely stuck. What do you do when you face an obstacle like that?
Well, Mehmed's solution was one of the most audacious and, frankly, one of the most unbelievable plans in all of military history. If you can't go through the water, you go over the land. In a single night, his engineers built a road of greased logs, and his army physically dragged 70 ships uphill across a peninsula and down into the Golden Horn. The next morning, the defenders woke up to an impossible sight, an entire Ottoman fleet sitting right behind their unbreakable chain. It was an absolute masterstroke, both strategically and psychologically.
After weeks and weeks of this relentless bombardment, the defenders were just exhausted, and the walls were crumbling. So, on the night of May 28th, Mehmed gave the order for his entire army to prepare. After a day of rest and prayer, the stage was set for one last, massive, all-out assault in the pre-dawn hours of May 29th. The fate of an empire was going to be decided by morning.
Now, for centuries, there was this popular myth that the city fell because somebody just forgot to lock a small gate, the Corcoporta. But the reality is, it's less about a simple mistake and more about sheer, overwhelming force. That story was probably invented later on, maybe to preserve the legend of the wall's invincibility. The truth is, the walls fell because they were systematically broken down and then just completely overwhelmed by a massive three-wave assault.
The final assault was absolutely brutal. Wave after wave of Ottoman soldiers just crashed against the walls, and eventually they broke through. A section near the St. Romanus Gate was breached. Emperor Constantine XI, seeing that the end had come, reportedly shed his imperial robes and led his last remaining soldiers in one final desperate charge right into the flood of invaders. He died fighting, the last Caesar of Rome.
But the fall of Constantinople wasn't just an ending, it was also a profound beginning. This one event is often what historians point to as the real end of the Middle Ages, an event that would fundamentally reshape the entire course of history. Let's take a look at the global consequences. The ripple effects were just immense. First, the Roman Empire, in one form or another, was finally gone, after more than 1,500 years. The city was reborn as Istanbul, the incredible capital of a newly solidified Ottoman Empire, which was now a dominant world power. But the impact stretched way beyond the city. With the old trade routes to the east now under firm Ottoman control, European powers were forced to find new sea routes, a desperate search that would kick off the age of exploration. And crucially, a wave of Byzantine scholars fled the city and went to Italy, carrying with them ancient knowledge that would help supercharge the Renaissance. And that's a point that's really worth sticking with for a second. The Renaissance was already starting in Italy, but the arrival of these scholars with their priceless libraries of ancient Greek and Roman texts, knowledge that had been lost to Western Europe for centuries, it was like pouring gasoline on a fire. This massive injection of classical knowledge is seen as a key catalyst that just accelerated this incredible period of art and learning.
And what about Mehmed? Well, from then on, he was known as Mehmed the Conqueror. And in this really fascinating historical twist, he didn't see himself as the destroyer of the Roman Empire. He saw himself as its inheritor. He even adopted the title Kaisar Rum, which means Caesar of Rome, and he viewed his new Ottoman Empire as the direct continuation of that Roman legacy.
So it really leaves us with this huge question, doesn't it? If those legendary walls had just held out one more time, would the Renaissance have unfolded in the same way? Would Columbus have ever sailed west, looking for a new route to India? The fall of this one city truly did change everything. It's just a powerful reminder of how a single day in history can echo through eternity.